Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the special after show of the show Star Trek Online. This week we're going to do some builds. Some users have been asking us around here, hey, what can we do with some of these type of builds here? Or how would you design this ship with this layout? And I want to do this. I want to fly this type of specific way, or I want to have this type of loadout. What would you do? So we have a dream team of experts here who are ready to push their limits on their own imaginations. You give us the ship. You give us what you want as far as a loadout, and we'll give you the optimal loadout that we can think of here. So, Captain SOB, Captain Snipey, and Captain Timberwolf are joining us here tonight. And this is your man over here, the Odin Knight, who doesn't know a damn thing about anything except how to have some fun. Let's get into it. We have some folks who sent us pretty much just we're condensing all this into one nice little ship build here. We have some folks who are playing science. They want to fly a science ship. They want to do a lot of science damage, but they want to supplement it with torpedoes because they're tired of falling all over the place. So what do we have here, folks, as far as builds? What can we show them?
Well, I'm going to have to say that this was, like I've built some good science ships. This build actually really challenged me because of the torpedo factor and how you can supplement exotic damage abilities that you can only use every 30 seconds or 45 seconds or so with torpedo abilities. So we are talking. Sorry, we're talking about this Pathfinder here. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we're talking about the one that we actually had linked up. Somebody had actually linked a Pathfinder and they said, how would you build this one out? I want to use torpedoes with this.
Sure. So, yeah. So this was actually really, really challenging. I haven't actually changed too much apart from I know that Odin has worked on the skill tree. I haven't really changed too much except for increasing abilities that would help you survive better, based on, I'm sure Odin can tell you more about how much threat that you're going to generate for yourself using torpedoes on top of your exotic damage abilities, which are also kinetic based, which do generate a lot of threat for you as well. What I've sort of come up with, I've left the Lieutenant Universal and the Lieutenant Tactical pretty much the same. The Lieutenant Engineering, I've gone with a Emergency Powder Shields 1 and an Auxiliary to Structural Integrity Field 1. Since you're going to be running a high auxiliary power anyway, being a science captain, and also not having to rely on weapons power for your primary weapons, Auxiliary to Structural Integrity Field 1 is already pretty much one of the strongest hull heals in the game, and with a high auxiliary power, a hull heal that you can do every 15 seconds, and even at the rank 1 ability, can keep you out of trouble. In your Commander Science, I have kept that pretty much the same. So you've got your Science Team 1, you've got the Stabilizing, Destabilizing Resonance Beam 2, Gravity Well 1, and Tractor Beam Repulsors 1. But I have changed the Lieutenant Commander Science. I've kept the Hazard Emitters 1 there and the Destabilizing Resonance beam as well. So you've got 2 copies of that you're going to cycle. It's basically going to be your version of Attack Pattern Beta. It's going to be your way of debuffing your enemy. It's only going to be a single enemy debuff, but whoever you're firing your torps at, even though you're using a area of effect attack, the person that you're debuffing with the Destabilizing Resonance Beam is going to be debuffed when they get shot with their torpedoes. The Lieutenant Commander ability I changed to what's called Subspace Vortex 3, even with a moderate amount of particle generators, which is what your science abilities, how powerful your science abilities are. 15 seconds after you deploy a gravity well, you can deploy subspace vortex. Okay, it's a much more powerful version of gravity well when it comes to doing damage, but it hasn't got anywhere near the suction ability that gravity well has. So the premise here is that you pitch yourself an infected conduit, you gravity well your spheres into one sort of just ball of spheres, and then 15 seconds later you do the subspace vortex. So they'll all be clustered. You've got about 5 seconds left of gravity well, and then you've got this subspace vortex doing a lot of kinetic damage to them, and then you just fire off your torps, and they're all clustered there in a small little area. If you destroy a couple of them, the warp core breaches from the rest of them will take them all out. That's the sort of premise of where I've gone there. The rest of the build haven't really changed that much, to be honest. I think the main focus of this build, if you really want to go torpedoes, you need to have your science abilities sort of complementing that ability. Since you're not going to be firing at will everywhere, you want to basically use these your science abilities to do as much damage as possible and have a limited amount of crowd control with it as well. With your TBRs, your tractor beam repulsors as well, you could get them to work better for you if you save up and invest in a duty officer called Graga Mal. I think that's spelled Graga, last name Mal, and that basically turns your tractor beam repulsors into ones that push away into ones that hold on to your enemy. And that means that the damage that your tractor beam repulsors do will hold on to the enemy and will just keep doing damage for the duration of the tractor beam repulsors. So that's pretty much all. It was a weird build for me. I actually struggled with it. So yeah, if you do it, I wouldn't mind hearing how you go with it.
Some thoughts I just thought of to add to this. If you want to buff your particle generator damage up a bit more, you can run, I believe it's the Solanae deflector. I believe that gives quite a boost to particle gens, and if you can get it to ultra rare, it's a massive buff.
+50. Yeah, +50.
And if you wanted to go full out on particle gens, you could swap the adapted Mako set for the Romulan or Reman engines and shield. Those give I think it's around a 16 part gens buff.
Something like that. See, that's where I struggled with this build. It was in the space set, in the deflector, impulse engine, and shield combination, because you always have to have that combination complementing where your ship's going to be doing the most damage. So if you're gonna be trying to get the most out of the torpedoes and doing most of your damage from the torpedoes with your science abilities complementing that, then the counter command deflector and the two-piece adaptive Mako is the way to go. Now, if you want to have that the opposite way, where you do most of your damage with your science abilities complemented by torpedoes, then what Spencer just said then is probably a better alternative for you.
And this is pretty much why I wanted to do something like this, because I have my favoritism here. I have my bias more towards torpedoes because I understand the mechanics of torpedoes and how they interact with a lot of mobs, whether shielded or unshielded. And since a lot of people want to try and test this out in a group setting, typically it's an ISA run. So with my mindset, I'm thinking if I was going to run a size ship, this is what I would do. This is how I would load it out. And I would have science complement my torpedo loadout, and I want a very maneuverable ship that can fly in and out of danger, that can drop heavy ordnance on the target, debuff the target constantly, do as much damage to it as quickly as possible, and if there's an AoE group or a massive AoE group, be able to grab them up, push them out of range after I fire torpedoes at them, so they're not going to constantly fire back at me. That's where I came back over with this Pathfinder build here. Let me see if I could get the page to share here for a moment. The initial build here for it is right here. hopefully this will come in a little bit clear for everybody here. So that's where I came up with this one initially, where I'm not being very knowledgeable about the deflectors. I just chose the one that I think, this might work here. But if I was focusing more on a Park Gens build, I would probably go with the inhibitor one for the radiation boost, because then that would start working with Neutronic, with the counter command console, which also boosts radiation damage, and then it starts kind of adding on a little bit more damage to it. Plus, I would change TAC Team 1 for Chemosite, which will also add even more radiation to it. Actually, I had it down here already, sorry. But I will still keep TAC Team 1 here. That's why I did it that way. My bad. Anyway, TAC Team 1 you want to have right before you fire Chemosite and before you fire your torpedoes, because those will definitely boost your damage for those items there. As far as science abilities, to my understanding, they would not be boosted by TAC Team 1. Is that correct?
For science abilities, they would not get boosted by TAC Team 1. That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So, yeah, so with that said, you could have, for whatever macros you use in order to be able to buff whatever before you pop out your science abilities, make sure that you have that set up first, and in a second set of macros that'll pop your buffs before you start using your kinetic abilities. That would include anything that would be a supplemental to or a boost to kinetic. Chemosite before you fire your torpedoes. TAC Team 1 before you activate Chemosite. Then you can have spreads launched here. You could swap to a high yield if you want to use more high yields for your build or your play style. If you have a command ship running around as a command ship running concentrate firepower because your buddy loves you so much, you could get away with 2 copies of spread, and you'll constantly start chaining high yields all over the place. And until Cryptic fixes it, the nice little bug here with this particle emission plasma torpedo is that if you already have your target covered with a pep cloud, not only is that pep cloud boosted by part gens, but if concentrate firepower is put on any target within that pep cloud, you are guaranteed to get the concentrate firepower proc. And then you will literally start spamming high yield ones all over the place. So that right there is going to be a huge boon for you if you have a wingman who's putting up concentrate firepower for you and you use the particle emission plasma torpedo. By the way, for any science build that's doing a heavy part gen, particle emission plasma torpedo. That is your de facto go-to torpedo for this type of ship and this type of build. Get it, love it, use it, abuse it. If you put it out in PvP, you spread with it, people will QQ to death.
Oh, absolutely. It's just the particle emission that comes off that torpedo is boosted by your particle generators, which is what boosts all your science skills. So it basically just burns through your enemy.
It's a complete 100% shield bypass for that damage. Now the kinetic damage is not a shield bypass, so there is some kinetic damage on there, but it is weak. But that's not why you want this torpedo here. You want it because of that 100% shield bypass damage, not just from the plasma dot, which is nasty on spread alone, but that pep cloud, oh, people will hate you for it. And it's a good thing. Going on with the rest of the set bonuses here, and the reason why. Neutronic, obviously a good all-around torpedo. The radiation damage on this thing is nice. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, with the radiation from secondary deflector, was it the inhibiting one? Would that proc radiation? How does the inhibiting one work? Educate me on that one again, please.
Okay, so there are 3 or 4 secondary deflectors available for science ships, and they are basically grouped around what sort of science ship are you building. So one type of there's 3, and the Salone, which comes from an event ship a couple of years ago, so that's really not in the game. So there's 3. it basically comes around from what sort of science ship you're building. There's one that's specific for drain builds. There's one that's specific for some of the I think the more of the abilities that you don't really use that often, like mask energy signature and those sort of things. Deteriorating, hang on, let me just make sure I'm not talking out of school here. Inhibiting is the one that generally gets used when you're using a gravity well or a tractor beam repulsor or something like that. And what that does is that 4 seconds after you apply a gravity well or one of the abilities that's listed in the description of the deflector, it applies this moderate radiation damage. So if the enemy moves out or gets away from your science ability, you won't score any extra radiation damage. But if you can keep them there in your gravity well, they're just going to start getting this constant radiation damage. I think it's 50% shield bypassing. I think every second for up to 15 seconds.
That part I do remember. That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really, really easy to work out what deflector that you need, because when you look at the description, it just says it has all these things, adds all these abilities, like all these part gens and flow caps and stuff. But at the bottom of that, it's got a list of abilities that it's applicable for, and you will know that you've got a tractor beam repulsor, you've got a gravity well, so you know that this is the secondary deflector that I need.
Now, going back on to the set bonuses here and why you would want them for this ship loadout, with the neutronic torp, yes, it's quote unquote the strongest torp in the game. But since we're not boosting kinetic damage here, we actually have this primarily for the set bonus, and secondarily because this torpedo does strong kinetic damage. It does strong radiation damage in an AoE up to 3 kilometer sphere, and it will do a lot of damage to the shields of the target there. So this could actually help weaken your target if your PEP is on cooldown, for example, but you need to put out something there quick. This neutronic torpedo will help, especially if you have a bunch of mobs already clustered up in a grav well, or you're pushing against a transformer or some sort of stationary structure with the tractor beam repulsors. Neutronic is your heavy-hitting torpedo if you want that instantaneous punch right in their face. You want to have that. Then you also have the binaural gel pack. That right there, the 2-piece set bonus right there, will boost radiation damage. Good for this build with the secondary deflector. The 3-piece here is your kicker. It's isokinetic cannon. Now granted, it's a 1-minute cooldown for a weapon, but with particle manipulators change right now, and all these part gens that you are literally stacking on this build, you are going to hit like a truck. I've seen people with around 400 part gens hitting for 150k crits with isokinetic cannon. Granted, yes, it is a 1-minute cooldown, but when you need to really hurt one target in particular with a big punch, that's your weapon right there. Everything else will start becoming, good, steady DPS, but then this will add that big, much-needed punch if you need to take out a target quickly, or if it's a big target like a tac cube or a gateway, that's extra spike that you're throwing there on top of everything else. Now, with the rest of the stuff here, the AMACO set, boosted torpedo damage, that's already in there. Counter command deflector, that's a boost to your torpedo skills, which if we go to the skill tree, you'll be able to see that if you have that maximized. Let me see if I have it here on this other ship, which I do. This is what your skill tree is going to look like. The links, obviously, if you need this to be a little bit clearer, the links will be in the description. No big deal. We have projectile weapons and projectile weapon specialization maxed out. Now, the counter command deflector and TAC team will boost starship projectile weapons beyond the maximum we have here. For each boost, it's a nice Cat 1 increase to your damage for each of your torpedoes that you're shooting out. What you will want to make sure is right before you fire your torpedoes, make sure TAC team is running. Make sure TAC team is running. Because I see a lot of people who fire neutronic and expect it to do a lot of damage, and suddenly it's like, what happened? They're not pushing TAC team. They're not maximizing their damage because they don't have TAC team right before they fire this torpedo. Also here, you have the experimental proton weapon. And the reason why I want to put that in the front instead of another torpedo is because this thing, the proc for it, procs often. And it crits often. And I like it. And when you have a lot of these plasma consoles, yes, aka the doping consoles, this thing here will cause it to crit. This will cause it to crit, and then the plasma explosions themselves will crit. This is the unless they change it again, this is the exception to the fall rule, and I've been keeping that quiet until now, because this thing crits so bloody often, the plasma explosions will crit with it. Surprise, surprise. But this here will help with the plasma explosions to trigger, but that's not the reason why you have those consoles anyway. It's for your part gens. So you'll be doing a lot of damage with your science abilities. You'll be doing a lot of damage with isokinetic cannon when you have it up. Your secondary deflector will proc often with your Gravwell and your tractor beam repulsors. Everything else here is pretty much just to debuff your target, or a little bit of maneuverability here with aux to damp. Everything else here is survivability. This kinetic cutting beam, I just threw it on there just out of habit, although you don't really need it. You can swap this out for an Omni beam of your choice. I personally would go with a disruptor with over, just because one, over is fun. Two, when it triggers, it can trigger either for this Omni beam or the advanced Thoron infusion if it's in the arc, or for the experimental proton weapon, which does hit hard on over. And pretty much it. The rest of it, grab torp, so whenever you have your aft, you're trying to run away from the target, you can still do a spread, grab torp out to your targets. It still has a 1/3 chance to proc. Only one torpedo out of the spread will proc and cause a rift. But it's nice to see those little rifts flying around on there. Unfortunately, the rifts are not boosted by anything else in this game. Sad, sad, sad. Yes, we are. Cryptic, fix this, please. Thank you. The other part I want to mention here with the consoles, the counter command multi-conduit energy relay, that also boosts radiation damage. And if you wanted to, say, run a Omni Phaser Disruptor, it'll boost that damage as well. Granted, it's only a little bit, but hey, every little bit counts. Other than that, it's pretty much done with this. It's just stack part gens, get a couple nice consoles here to boost your crit. The 3-piece Protonic Arsenal will boost your overall crit. Your particle emission plasma torpedo will get a benefit from your part gens. If you've built your or designed your skills around here to have a lot of grav gens, that should influence, I haven't fully tested it, but according to Vel, it should influence the strength of your grav wells from the grav torpedo.
It definitely does.
It definitely does? Okay, thank you for confirming that.
And it's a lot of fun when it procs too.
Because when you want something to really cluster a huge group of mobs together and then watch them orbit each other like a mad nest of bees that have been stirred up and they can't get out anywhere, that's what you do with this thing here. It's fun. It's fun. It does hit decently hard, but not as hard as Neutronic. We get that. But when you're going away from a bunch of mobs and you just stirred up and pissed off, you want to throw this with a spread and then just watch them circle each other for a while. Other than that, that's pretty much it as far as this build is concerned. I mean, it's not that hard to put together. You will spend some time for doing it. Go on.
I'll just put in the notes there, just my recommended bridge officer layout, just so if you can just edit the one build with that. I'll put it in the group chat. Sorry.
I got it. Popping it open now.
Now the other thing is, and I know I've mentioned this before, but it's such an unknown because I've never flown a ship like this before. You could really come under a lot of threat, and before investing in those Lobi consoles, the binaural and the tachyokinetic, maybe until you get used to the build, run a neutronium console of some description, something that just boosts your resistance to damage, while, just so if you fire off all your things and the whole map starts focusing on you, you know that you can withstand a little bit, or back away and those sort of things. If you go in there with very little resist, you mightn't survive. It might affect your survivability immensely. The other thing is there's, in the latest lockbox, and these are on the exchange and they're not that expensive, there is a crop of new duty officers. And one of them, they're all ultra rare in quality, and one of them is a chance to reduce your threat generated when you deploy your science abilities like gravity well and tractivity repulsor. Now, even though you are running, excuse me, in your science consoles, threat reduction consoles, it might not, depending on how hard you punch, it might not actually go all the way of reducing the threat that you generate for the NPCs. So I've just sent the link to Odin in the group chat to make sure that you get. So it's just a screenshot of the particular duty officer and what's the name. I think they've all got the same name. They're definitely all the same specialization. So they're all biochemists and ultra rare. And it's not really that expensive. It is only a 10% chance. These are brand new duty officers as well. I don't understand how that chance works. Say, for example, with a gravity well, it attacks every second. So is that chance calculated every second? Don't know that yet. But like I said, they're not that expensive. And if you are having trouble surviving, it may not be that bad an investment to give it a go. Yeah, so we're literally in guinea pig territory here because I haven't tried any of these new ultra rare duty officers yet myself. But yeah, it's as you can see, it's perfect for a really heavy science captain. If it does proc, it significantly any threat that you do have, even after the threat consoles that you've got in your ship reduce, it will reduce it by another 50%. So it may be a very good duty officer. It's just still too early to tell since they're brand new.
I actually see this as being very good for science torps because Vel and I were kind of working out the threat generation between both science and torpedoes. We kind of came up with a hypothesis on how the threat generation works, and Bork has confirmed at least a part of it here. That part of it works with distance to your intended target. If you're close to the target, your threat generation is boosted significantly. They see you as more of an immediate threat than somebody who's farther away from you. But it also appears to be, and we haven't got the confirmation from this yet, it also appears to be that use of science abilities and use of torpedoes treat to the targets involved are treated as if you were 0 kilometers away from them. So something like this, yeah, when you're activating any damaging non-weapon bridge officer ability, that wouldn't that also include any engineering abilities that does some sort of damage as well?
Yeah, that new
and Chemocyte too, if I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, not sure about that one, but the new engineering ability, the
structural
one that
integrity,
physical damage, that would fall under that category.
Okay, so we're looking at the engineering and the science ones then for sure, because structural integrity collapse, yes. So we have at least structural integrity collapse and any of your science abilities that are doing damage. That's your destabilizing resonance, your grav wells, your tractor beam repulsors. If you're constantly spamming that and these guys proc, that's a lot of threat reduction there. So you can, if for some reason you get really lucky or you're really rich and you got money to blow, throw down on these guys, get 3 of them, see exactly what runs with it. Because I'm thinking if they work just like how the projectile weapon officers work, they will run through them like a I keep forgetting the Italian's name for the trial, but it's a certain mathematical trial where it will check each one individually. And if one's a success, then you get your threat reduction. The other 2 are checked afterwards, and then if it makes it, great. If not, toss that out until the next ability is there. So you would have a chance to have 1 proc, at least 1 proc. The chance is high. At least 2 proc, the chance is somewhere around the 60th percent range. So that's a very good chance that 60% of the time, at least, you're going to have threat reduction. And that will help your survivability tenfold. So you could go more offensive on your engineering abilities and your science abilities and just keep doing that, and it'll proc that threat reduction there for you. So some poor schmuck running an escort who's about 5 kilometers away is actually going to start feeling the pain that you do when you're firing at 8 or 9 kilometers away. One other thing here to continue on with this build here, and this is the spec tree that I kind of thought of if I was a science guy running this. I wanted to use grav wells and tractor beam repulsors. This is how I would build it. Now, Snipey, what do you think here? And Spencer, if you guys have anything else to contribute, Timber, same thing with you. Feel free to jump in at any point in time. But
please scroll up.
Yes, starting with attack abilities here, I just went with Starship Weapons Training. Forget the attack patterns because I'm not going to run any attack patterns with a low tack seating, especially now that Chemocyte's in the game. It's great to have attack team, a torpedo ability, and a Chemocyte, and I'm done. And then from there, obviously, projectile weapons is a choice there. Targeting systems, that's right there as well. Projectile weapon specialization allows me to get a higher crit hit values for my torpedoes, which helps a ton when you start throwing down neutronics or pep torps, because the plasma procs from the pep torps crit, and they crit nicely. Any other comments with this before I scroll down here?
There's okay. There's first of all, I wouldn't have 0 points in maneuvers, especially where you're going to be relying. If you are going to be generating extra threat in yourself, despite all your attempts to reduce your amount of threat, you're still going to have enemies shooting at you. And what Starship Maneuvers does is basically it's basically your defense rating. So it is the higher that is, the more the enemy will potentially miss you based on what their accuracy rating is. Now, there's you can assume that every AI in the game's got an accuracy rating of at least what our base accuracy rating is, which is 100. So the more that you have that higher, out of every 10 shots, it may be 1 shot gets missed, or 2 shots gets missed, or 3 shots get missed. Okay, and that could mean, the life or death for you. The other thing is, and not meaning to pick all these holes into
No. By all means, this is exactly what we're supposed to do there. Pick the holes.
Yeah. Okay, so if you could just scroll down. Can you zoom out a little bit, actually? Yeah. Now, where you're going to get those points from that I've just sort of suggested that Marshall adds up to in maneuvers. Starship subsystem repair. Okay. There are a lot of set pieces now in the game which will either bring your weapons back online or bring your engines back online, or you could hit a battery for that ability, or an emergency power to that ability, or an engineering team which will recover all of them. The problem with subsystem repair is that it completely relies on the crew that's on your ship. So if you have got crew that's on your crew bars all in the red, doesn't mean you can have a lot of subsystem repair points. You're still not going to bring your subsystems back online that quickly because of the fact that your crew is either incapacitated or they're all dead. So to me, putting anything in subsystem repair is always a waste of points because you know, you're getting hit by torpedoes, Borg torpedoes all the time. You're always going to get crew damage, okay? And because the crew system in this game is a bit funky, you tend not to, if you can get away with it, put on abilities on your ship that either rely on it or that gets buffed by it. And in this case, subsystem repair is definitely one of those. So I would always have that at 0. Where else is there? Can you scroll down so I can just have a look at science as well before I just make any other comments? Okay. Because you've only got a certain amount of points that you can spend in this tree, and that's 300,000 in space, is you've got to be very careful of overspending points in the red zones. If you can help it, and some of them where you want to eke out every little bit, yeah, you go ahead and do it. But in a lot of them, you probably wouldn't. And a few examples of this are in your well, let's start from the top of the tree. Let's go back up to military, and we'll just start taking points off where it's not very efficient to have it there. So targeting systems, yeah, you can have it. If you've got the points to spare, you can have it to red, but generally you probably don't need it. There are a lot of extra things in this game as you develop your intel tree. You've got starship traits which buff your accuracy, which is what targeting systems are. So you can save yourself a few points there. In engineering systems, in hull repair, the difference between the top of the yellow and all that red might be only a very, very, very small amount of hull. So that's sort of where we save a lot of the points a lot of the time, unless you're a tank specifically built for PvP or specifically built to, to master hive, and you want to eke out every little bit of hull repair that you can. You generally don't do it there. In warp core efficiency, again, this is Federation. Again, I don't know, Spencer, you may disagree with this. I tend not to put over 6 there. Some people say go the whole block. Sorry, not on the Fed, yeah.
Yeah, 6 points should be more than enough.
Warp core efficiency does, the lower you have your setting below 75, the more of a bonus it gives you to that subsystem. So if you have it at 15, you get this great amount of bonus. But the difference of those 3 bars, which costs you about 4,500 points, is not that much. The other one is warp core potential. I would never put that for a Fed all into the red, because the difference between having no bars in there and full bars in there, the difference between having no bars in there is 0 bonus to your subsystems. Having full bars in there is only 5. So if you have the 3 greens and the 3 yellows, I think it's 4.5 or in the early 4s or high 3s. It's very, very, very negligible difference to 5 for the amount of points that you're spending. Electroplasma systems always have it at full. Impulse thrusters always have it at full. That's your maneuverability. And now you're getting to the more expensive part of engineering systems. I would never have to start off with the performance, you've got engine performance, shield performance, weapons performance, and auxiliary performance. And basically what they are, they're just a flat bonus to your 4 power subsystems. And the easy way to work out what they give, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen that 3 greens and 3, on engines, 3, when it's full, it gives 99 skill, So what does that add to the engine subsystem? Just divide 99 by 10. So it's adding 9.9 to that subsystem. So spending an extra 7,500 points for an extra 1.5 power to that subsystem, is that worth it? Absolutely not. So in those performance, unless you've got points to spare, you never really put them over the 3 yellows. That's the same with auxiliary performance as well. So you can see that we're getting some points back here that we'll be able to put to the places that I said earlier as well. So now there are some points to potentially put back. Shield performance, that depends on where you're going to have your power subsystem setting. For me, on a science ship, I never normally go over the 3 greens because science ships generally have a boost to that subsystem anyway, and you get to save yourself some points there. So just before we go and add some points back, let's go down to science and see where we can save there as well. So again, another one where you would never max out is shield emitters. Just for the extra 3,000 points, you just don't get enough benefit for spending those extra 3,000 points. And again, on shield systems, particularly on a science ship where you've got a very high shield modifier, you would probably not spend the extra 3 reds in there as well. Now, where you do want to max them out is in your particle generators. That's really how you do damage with your science abilities. So yes, that's correct, having them completely maxed out. Why do we have, Marshall, if I can just ask you, the flow capacitors? Why is it, I didn't see a plasmonic leech there. Was it, what else had drain abilities there?
None. The only other thing I would put on there, and it's just out of habit, was for neutronic, because neutronic torpedo has a drain capability in it. Now, even with maxing out flow caps there, it's probably, let me see, with that and the deflector, probably -9 per torpedo.
So would you commit 9,000 points for one?
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't commit any. Whatever your deflector gives you, or any of your sets give you, that's where the drain component of that torpedo can get its power from. So getting some efficiencies back now, you can see that we've saved, what's that, 66,000 points. Now, the other thing I just noticed there is that ground has 67 on it. You can really just drop that back 1 to 66. You don't really need to spend, just in medic, mate, just one that's worth 1,000 points. Yeah, just drop 1 back in medic, yeah. So, yeah, don't have, since you do most of your stuff in space, never spend more than 66 on ground. Okay? So let's start adding these points back. So up to the top, Marshall, please. So let's add 6 to maneuvers. Scrolling down. Okay, let's add 6 to structural integrity. Okay, so what structural integrity is basically how much bigger your hull is. And again, those 3 reds are neither here nor there. Oh, sorry, I missed out on batteries as well. Batteries is a really, really easy one to work out. Every battery that you have lasts for 10 seconds. So what the battery skill does is, if you've maxed it out like we have here, for example, that's another 9.9 seconds that battery is going to last for. So again, you've got to ask yourself, is the extra 3,000 points worth the extra 1.5 seconds of a battery being up? To me, no. On an engineer, maybe, because the battery skill does have impact some of the captain abilities, so I might do it on an engineer, but on anything else I probably wouldn't. Yeah, if you had points to burn, maybe. Okay, so in here, you need to add a small amount of points to hull plating and armor reinforcement. And what they are, the hull plating is your resist to energy damage, and your armor reinforcement is your resist to kinetic damage. Now, resist suffers from what we call diminishing returns. So the more points you add here, the less you get back per point. So I never put more than 3 in here.
Yeah, never more than 3.
Never more than 3, because basically the 3 points you've added there, every neutronium console you add will not get the full benefit of that neutronium console. So, so the more points the more resist you try and put on your ship, the less you get back for it. So that's as much as I would put there. So down to your science skills. So there are 2 glaring omissions here now in your science skills that you need to address. It's one in power insulators and one in inertial dampeners. And you can see we've only got about 31,500 points left. What power insulators does, it basically gives you resistance to any sort of energy drain that your ship would encounter, and that includes shields. So, you know, the Borg have this massive shield, the Borg spheres have this massive shield drain. That can offset slightly how effective that is. On the other hand, inertial dampeners, what that does, that basically, how long do you get affected by abilities that disable you? Like some of the herald abilities, like the ionic turbulence, like how the duration of the disable, but also when you're getting help by stuff like tractor beams, how strong is that disable? Like if on inertial dampeners, on a ship that's got a high inertial dampener skill point, getting held by some tractor beam, you could still be moving forward if you've got a high enough skill. Or the abilities like the Borg tractor beam mightn't be as effective on you. So balancing out the remaining points in these 2 areas is basically what I would do for the rest of this build. And for me, I would put at least 3 in insulators. And how much points does that leave us left?
We have 273 out of 300,000.
Yeah. So let's add 3 into dampeners.
So we have 20,000 points left.
Let's add another. Let's add another couple into dampeners. And yeah, geez, you can bring insulators up to 6 as well, and so you've got leftover points. So it's really, you've now got to balance it out. You can see that you're at 292,500, so you've at least got to get that to 1,000 number. So whether you put that into a shield system, into your structural integrity, anywhere in the 2nd column or the 4th column, to balance that out to 1,000 number, and then just put the remaining points, you know, just somewhere really. It really doesn't matter now. You've covered all the basics. That's a pretty decent science build in regards to doing damage, also a bit of survivability, having your power levels right, and Marshall's the expert at the military section for the torpedoes.
You see, and this is why I wanted to have the brain trust here. So our chief science officer here has educated me on how to build a proper science ship here, instead of me just guesstimating, maybe this might work or this might work. He brings the logic and the reasoning behind why we should or should not maximize some of these items here. So thank you, SOB, thank you, Snipey, for pretty much just fleshing out this skill tree here. And it's given me some ideas on how I can modify my own for my own torpedo build as well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Is there anything else that we want to cover with this or showcase as far as the builds, or we're just
pretty much it?
All right. I'm going to save this one here. I want to save this one here, and we're going to link this into the builds, and that's pretty much it. Now, we know we have a couple other people who will be submitting builds for us to critique or review or come up with something of our own imagination, so we'll be doing this again at least one more time next week. Maybe, whenever we have some spare time throughout the week. But, we actually would like to play the game, too, as well as help everybody out. And we usually help a lot of people out in-game while we're playing. So if we don't showcase your build here, catch us in-game. We'll help you out. From the rest of the crew here at the show, this is Old Knight saying to Captain Snipey, Captain SOB, the commander of Cheese-aholics and Cheese Maneuvers, Mr. Timber Wolf, please bring us some more showcasing in the games. Check out his channel. Check out what he's done. By the way, congratulations. I'm not only cracking, but smashing past 50K DPS. Awesome job, man.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. We'll check you all later on. Have a good night.
See you guys.